Greetings and welcome to another video. Now today there's no hardcore road to glory and I did play qualifiers this weekend, so we will be talking about that in a video soon in the hardcore road to glory. But this is a video I wanted to make about second man press, second man contain, whatever you want to call it. The feature where you press R1 on PlayStation or RB on Xbox and a second man will pressure or help you pressure the ball holder. Now it's been completely destroyed for FIFA 20, and before we get into the examples and like my points, I wanted to know, in my opinion, it was a really bad decision. It was a really bad decision to completely destroy it as opposed to balance it. It was a bad decision to do that and then leave us with defensive mentalities, and I'm going to show you a few examples to illustrate my point. So let's get into a couple of clips right here. All right, so let's get into the clip. My current webcam is probably too dark. I usually use the PC light to give me light. Ignore the second webcam if you can see it. So let's take a look at this goal. I have a bunch of clips scattered in this video. This is the goal in fast motion. Let's look at it again in slow motion, right? Okay, so I remember when I conceded this, I knew exactly why I conceded this, right? So this is a situation in FIFA 20 which is really kind of frustrating to defend because your opponent is running down the wing and I was selecting here my fullback, my midfielder, and I knew that if there was a player of his in this area, I would be kind of in a bad position because I can't do the old trick of, switching into this player and covering this area. And while I do that, I'm holding R1 so he can follow him for a few seconds. And then I eventually switch back to the fullback and focus on the ball holder again. But if R1 was a thing in this situation, I wouldn't really have a problem because, in this moment, I would switch to him really quickly, dribble here, and throughout this whole process, hold R1. He stays there for a few seconds, not even, like a half a second. Then I quickly switch back and I deal with him once again. Maybe I switch back to him. But in this situation, I know that I can't do that because of how heavily R1 was nerfed. And of course, this is what happens. Even without R1, with R1, I don't understand how this even happens. There is no reason for him to get this ball. He was miles ahead. Even if I'm not controlling him, my defender should definitely get this ball. But, it is what it is. So in this game, you really do need R1. You really do need second man press. And the nerf was completely inexcusable because I concede this goal for no reason. And this translates really well in all chances on the wing in FIFA 20. It's a huge, huge problem for the defender in these cases because you can't do two things at once. There are flaws with R1, second man press, second man contain, and I'll discuss them in a second. But it allowed you to do two things at once, so there was a big skill to it. It obviously just needed to be balanced, and I'll discuss that in a second. But as you can see, in this chance, I also conceded. Well, no, mostly because this makes no sense, but I also conceded because there is no R1 second man press. Now, the same thing happens here. This is another FIFA 20 clip. Now, look what happens here, right? You might not notice anything, but all right, let me rewind it a little second. So we get to this point. He does the through ball to his Mbappe, I believe. I select Malquit because, obviously I'm right there. Now, here's what I'm thinking. Look at my Pogba, right? If I'm not selecting Pogba, he is walking back, which means he's not going to get to this area. He's not going to cover this area. So I'm kind of concerned about my opponent's midfielder, whatever, up here. He's got a couple players. If they come into this gap right here, and I do nothing to cover this area, I'm screwed. But I can't cover this area with him because I have to follow the ball holder, right? So ideally in this scenario, while I put him on track to follow him, which I do, right here, I switch back to Pogba, who I can drag out for literally not even a second, a little bit closer to this area, so I can do two things at once, right? And while I do that, I hold R1 or second man press so that he can track him for a second. Then I'll select him really quickly. But look what happens. This is FIFA 20, right? So when you do second man press, they don't track at all. If anything, they don't track at all. But if they do, it's like they start jogging. Because look at the change of Malquit's pace, right? He's running full speed. Now second man press, you see how he slows down? I'm Pogba. Because I'm trying to cover this. So now I lose space on the ball holder. And then, you know, the situation was really a really easy one to defend, so it didn't end up poorly. But you noticed how in the previous situation, which had much more danger and he actually had the ball, it led to me conceding a goal. Now, this is a problem because, okay, in this situation, it didn't lead to anything, but there is no reason why I should be punished for doing two things at once. Of course, it's overpowered if you can hold R1 and he keeps going full speed for too long. But in this current state, you know, I'm trying to do two things at once, and I almost, you know, he could, if he was a really top player at this point, he does one of those accelerated 45-degree fake shots, and he's gone. You know, I can't track him anymore, and I got punished because I was thinking about two things to worry about. And unfortunately, this game without R1 in these situations on the wing force you to only think about one thing at once, because if you try to do two things, it kind of punishes you. Now, this is a clip from FIFA 17, polar opposite situation. So what I'm doing here, Marcelo was, you know, I'm marking Marcelo. I am Marcelo marking Messi, and for a split second, I switch off of him. But look at it, look at this, look what happens, right? So I'm sprinting, I switch off. I didn't press R1 fast enough because he starts jogging, but then he starts sprinting again. You see that? Polar opposite from the previous example, where as soon as I started pressing R1 second man press, my player started jogging the tracked run, or sorry, jogging for the ball holder. Whereas here, Marcelo, I'm pressing R1, and he starts pressing, so it allows me to select my center back, Ramos, to position myself in a way where I feel comfortable here, and then when I'm done with that, I can switch back into Marcelo and proceed and cover the ball holder, because how am I supposed to defend if I don't have something that allows me to cover the ball holder and the passing lane correctly? Of course, again, it needed to be balanced, but I think we were in a better spot with this balance as opposed to what we have now. Now, the second way that this is, you know, or really bad in FIFA 20 is pressing in the final third, right? Or not in the final third, but in your opponent's half. So here, my opponent has the ball, right? He's on his back line, and this is my Neymar, so this is his half. In my case, it would be the final third. And so ideally, what I want to do here to press the ball is I want to push my Neymar downwards, and while I put him on the right track, I really quickly switch to someone up here, and I run back here, so that I have two players coming down at once, but I've done that myself. Yes, the R1 is me telling the CPU to run there, but I've triggered it and timed it myself, and I've switched to the right player here, and so I'm coming down, ideally, with two men of pressure, but this is FIFA 20. So, what happens, right? As soon as I switch out, right here, this is when I'm just holding R1. Pay attention, the second indicator is on Neymar, so this is who should be pressing. He's completely disinterested, doesn't do anything. The second indicator goes all over the place, and no one does anything. Nobody. No one's pressing. Like, I'm here, I'm holding R1, right, for second man press. Do you see anyone giving me any help? Like, it's completely dead. Sorry, this was Cavani, I think. Okay, my bad. Anyways, Cavani only turns around because that's just a natural movement of, you know, him going up and down with a ball movement, but there's no pressure being given. The same thing happens right here. So I'm in FIFA 20 in the games of rivals, and I'm with Mbappe and with Neymar. So what I want to do with Neymar here is kind of push him in this direction, right? Get him here and then get him to push this way. But at the same time I do that, I also want to select my Pogba and cover the fullback. Of course, that's not what happens, but the point still stands. Look what happens, right? Boom. There, this is when I switch. Obviously, I switched to Pogba. It switched me to the fullback. Player switching. It is what it is. But the same thing should have happened. At this point, I'm selecting Malquit, and I'm holding R1. Does anybody move? Nobody moves anywhere near the ball, right? You got Pogba, who's just chilling here, marking this guy. And then the guy closest to the ball, aka Neymar, aka the person that should be pressing if I'm pressing R1 at this point, is not doing anything. Like, he doesn't keep running this way, at least for a couple of steps, just to give the pressure that I wanted. Nothing happens, right? Nothing ever happens if you switch out of someone, cover something else, and then you hold R1. Nothing really happens. It really feels useless. So now we have a FIFA 17 clip of the example in the final third of pressing in someone's half, right? So let's see what's happening. At this point, this is what I really like to do in previous FIFAs. I really like to expose myself. So I put myself in danger by, holding R1 while I was pushing at someone else in their own half. Because if they passed through me, I was in trouble, but I'd rather be in trouble and make someone have, to take the decision, make someone be put under pressure. If under pressure you get out of it, I respect that. I'm fine with that. I'd rather do that instead of inviting the pressure, right? So this the second man press feature was something that I really loved. So at this point, I was Bale, right? And then I switched out of Bale and I selected James Rodriguez. And so I switched back into Bale, back into Rodriguez. Now I'm holding R1. And look at this. Boom. He's following me. He's following me. He's following me and really putting pressure on my opponent. Now, of course, he could pass up here, here, and he's just gotten through 3 of my players. But I want the option to push up manually, right? And this is the key word, manually, because this is kind of possible nowadays with defensive mentalities, except you're not deciding who gets pushed up. You're not deciding when you're pushing up. It's just the CPU deciding whether you're on pressure on heavy touch or pressure after possession loss or pressure or constant pressure. It's the CPU doing everything and you're just watching things unfold. Whereas here, I'm holding R1. I'm accountable for this guy being pushed here. I'm pushing here, and had he gone here, he would have been in a really bad position, and that was my own bait. Was it good bait? Was it bad bait? It doesn't matter. The point is that it's my move, my actions, and therefore that's more manual than what we have now. Now another example right here, subtle but effective, subtle but meaningful. This is the difference here. My opponent has the ball with his goalie. I'm Ronaldo. I put Ronaldo here, so I'm cutting this passing lane, but then I want him to do more. I want him to start going this way, right? I've cut this passing lane enough. Maybe, he could still take a touch and get the pass around, but still, I've cut it enough for me in this moment. And then I want to switch into James and go myself this way or this way, cover something, but at the same time hold R1 so he, my CPU controlled player pushes this direction. So I make him have to have a choice. I make my opponent be in a situation where he has to make a decision. I don't care if I leave one option open. If I cover 2 out of 3 options and you go for the correct third option and you get out of the pressure, I respect it. So as you can see, I'm pressing R1 and right there, that run from Ronaldo is something that just doesn't happen anymore. Boom. You see that? In he goes, pressure, and I reselect him. I reselected him. As soon as I was holding R1 here and he starts to make his movement this way. I was James, and boom, as soon as he moved, I reselect him and now I'm in this position. But the whole point is that R1 allowed you to switch in and out of pressure on the opponent's third, and now we don't have that feature anymore. So of course, you're going to have a game where, possession hoarding is a thing. Time wasting is even easier. One last example here. So again, my opponent in his third, and I'm in here with Bale, then I switch out of Bale into Rodriguez, and I'm running this way. But while I run this way, I'm holding R1, and you see Bale pushes in. Boom, beautiful. Now, he doesn't push in all the way, because, he shouldn't. But he pushes in enough to make it feel like, trust me, once you're in a game between 2 players of equal skill, it might be a pro versus pro, a qualifier game, whatever you want. You feel this pressure with the R1, right? You feel it, and you see that the CPU control player is doing these moves. You see him sprinting at you. And so that added pressure makes you as a user think, I have to make a decision. I have to dribble out of that. And it makes you as the guy trying to press be able to put your opponent in that position. Now, if the opponent gets out of it, that's fantastic. But at least it's all about manually putting someone under pressure. There is a little bit of a positive to this. This whole, making R1 second man press absolutely useful has solved an old issue that we used to have, when you'd have the guy controlling his CDM on the edge of his box and just holding R1 second man press, and someone would be like, pressing on the perimeter for him and he's just chilling on the edge of the box. Okay, that's been solved, but you have to look at the bigger picture. Where are we now? Right? What do we have now? Because if you wanted to make it more manual, first of all, consider what you lose compared to what you gain. You gain the fact that you nerfed what I just mentioned, the whole second man press and the people using it on the edge of the box, but you lost the ability to manually press someone in their third. You know, the same guy who does that annoying defensive tactic would probably be the same guy who really suffered against me if I did that second man press tactic in his final third. So, you know, it's nice that he can't defend that way against me, but how many more interceptions in his third would I have if I could press him myself? You know, is it a true balance? Does only being able to really move one player really increase the skill gap more than what you lose out of it? Or does it introduce more scenarios like the one that I showed you guys at the beginning of the video on the wing, where it can't do two things at once? So I'm in a position where my opponent can just pass into a trajectory where I should be able to position my center back to cover the cross, but I cannot because I do not have second man press. So, you know, you have to understand that you lose the ability to also pressure up the field, and you only gain really a small part of skill, because at the end of the day, you cannot rely on defensive mentalities for skill. Because, you know, you could say that this has made defending more manual. I mean, I don't know, has it not? We play a game where defensive mentalities are a thing. Pressure on possession loss, or pressure after possession loss, sorry, pressure after a heavy touch. And when you use those settings, you should be able to see that no matter what you do, there are moments in the game because of those tactics that your CPU goes crazy. Your whole team is gonna swarm up the field because maybe you just lost possession, because maybe your opponent just had a heavy touch, and you have nothing to do with that pressure. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it just doesn't make sense that we've been left with that, but they took out R1. Because when I look at it, I'm thinking, why did they do this? So I'm thinking, if the attempt was to increase manual defending, it all falls apart because you've kept defensive mentalities in the game. Because defensive mentalities, if anything, puts us closer to Football Manager, where you choose setting, you choose tactics, and you see everything unfold before your eyes without you truly being the epicenter of what happens. You're not truly the epicenter at that point. It's the tactics, it's the game, it's the players, and everything unfolds me. It's just too much of a checkers game. Of course, there has to be an element of tactic, but that's where formations come in. FIFA should be a game where it's mostly user input. At least that's how I feel it should be. Overall, for me, what we used to have with R1 press and no mentalities was a better balance than what we have now, and it offered more of a skill gap. That said, of course, R1 needed to be balanced. It really did, because like I said, you had those guys just holding it while they defended, but completely destroying it while also leaving with defensive mentalities is something that I can't understand. I can't accept. I mean, it's really something that I really hope is going to get fixed for the next FIFA, because that's the best I can hope for at this point. Let me know you guys' thoughts. And again, until next time, peace out.